You're broken, and I need someone whole.
The rain-soaked woman standing outside the iron gates with a single torn suitcase didn't know her own name. But she knew exactly what heartbreak tasted like as she watched her husband drive away with another woman in the passenger seat where she used to sit. Nadia pressed her trembling hand against the cold metal gate, her dark skin glistening with rainwater, her breath coming out in short gasps. 3 years. 3 years she'd given this man everything she had, even though she couldn't remember anything before the accident that stole her memory. 3 years of loving him blindly, trusting him completely, believing him when he said her past didn't matter because their future was all that counted. And now on this cruel September night, she learned the truth. When a woman can't remember who she was, when she can't bring important people to fancy parties, when she can't help a man climb higher in society, she becomes trash, disposable, forgettable. The mansion behind those gates held every moment of the life she'd built from nothing. But Brennan Cole, billionaire, charmer, liar, had just erased it all with 7 words that would haunt her forever. You're broken, and I need someone whole. If this story grabs you, hit that subscribe button right now because what happens next will blow your mind. Drop a like and comment where you're watching from. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. Trust me. Inside the black car disappearing into the rain, Brennan didn't look back. Not once. Sitting beside him, the supermodel Vienna Stone touched up her lipstick in the mirror, her perfect face showing not a trace of guilt. Why would it? She'd won. The broken wife was gone, and now she could step into the role she'd been auditioning for all along. Mrs. Brennan Cole. The title came with a mansion, a fortune, and a man who would do anything to keep his image spotless. But what neither of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know as they drove toward their new life together, was that the woman shivering in the rain wasn't broken at all. She was just sleeping, and when she woke up, she would become their worst nightmare. Nadia spent that first night under a bridge downtown. The city lights reflected off the wet concrete, and the sound of cars passing overhead became a strange lullaby. She clutched the only thing she'd managed to grab before Brennan's security guards forced her out. A small silver locket she'd been wearing when she first woke up in the hospital 3 years ago. She didn't know why, but something told her this locket was important. It had a tiny inscription inside that she'd memorized but never understood. The sun sets so stars can shine. When morning came, Nadia's body ached from the cold, but something else ached worse. Pride. She'd let herself become so small, so dependent, so willing to be whatever Brennan needed her to be. Well, those days were over. If she had to start from zero, then that's exactly what she'd do. She found work at a diner on 5th Street. The pay was terrible, the hours were brutal, and the customers treated her like she was invisible. But Nadia didn't complain. She showed up early, stayed late, and saved every single penny. At night, she worked cleaning offices in the business district. Then before dawn, she delivered newspapers. 3 jobs, 4 hours of sleep, 0 days off. Her body screamed for rest, but her heart screamed louder for revenge. Not the messy kind, not the kind that lands you in jail, the kind that proves you were never the broken one to begin with. 6 months passed like this. Nadia's hands grew rough from work, her body grew lean from skipping meals, but her mind grew sharp from determination. She'd watch the business people in their expensive suits walk past her like she didn't exist, and she'd think, one day I'll walk past you and you'll wish you'd seen me. Then it happened, the thing that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Nadia was crossing the street after her diner shift when a delivery truck ran a red light. She didn't see it coming. One moment she was thinking about whether she could afford to buy new shoes with the holes in them, and the next moment she was flying through the air, her body hitting the pavement hard, her head cracking against the concrete. People screamed. Someone called an ambulance, but Nadia barely heard any of it because something was happening inside her head. Images flashed like lightning. A big office. A man with gray hair calling her princess. Numbers and graphs and meetings. A name. Her name. Her real name. Nadia Cole wasn't her real name at all. She was Jade Rivers. And she was the daughter of Richard Rivers, owner of Rivers Technology, one of the biggest tech companies in the country. The memories flooded back in waves so powerful she thought her head might split open. She remembered being 24, brilliant, and being groomed to take over her father's empire. She remembered a car accident 4 years ago, the one that was supposed to kill her but only stole her memory. She remembered waking up in a hospital with no ID, no memory, and no one looking for her because everyone thought she was dead, and she remembered something else. Something that made her blood run cold even as she lay bleeding on that street. Brennan Cole had known. He'd known exactly who she was. The pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. Brennan hadn't just found her by chance. He'd orchestrated everything. The accident that was supposed to kill her had been meant to remove Richard Rivers' heir so Brennan could make his move on the company. When it failed, when she survived but lost her memory, Brennan had seen an opportunity. Keep her close, keep her confused, marry her and make sure she never remembered who she was. But why throw her away now? Why risk her memory coming back? Because he'd already gotten what he needed. In the 3 years they'd been married, Brennan had been slowly, carefully, taking over parts of her father's company. With Jade Rivers presumed dead and no heir to challenge him, Richard Rivers had gotten older, weaker, sadder. Brennan had positioned himself as the sympathetic business partner, the son the old man never had. The takeover was nearly complete. Nadia, or Jade, or whatever her name was, had served her purpose. Keeping her around was just a risk now. The ambulance arrived. The EMTs loaded her onto a stretcher. And as as Jade Rivers, felt herself slipping toward unconsciousness, she made a promise to herself. She would rise again. Not as Brennan's broken wife, as her father's daughter, as the heir to an empire, as the woman who would take back everything that was stolen. Are you hooked yet? Because this story is about to get even crazier. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. The revenge is just beginning. When Jade woke up in the hospital 3 days later, she didn't call her father. Not yet. She needed to understand the full picture first. She needed to know exactly how deep Brennan's betrayal went and how much damage he'd done. So instead, she discharged herself, went back to her tiny apartment above a laundromat, and spent 2 weeks doing nothing but research. What she found made her sick. Brennan had been brilliant. She had to give him that. He'd convinced her father that a partnership between Cole Industries and Rivers Technology would be beneficial for both companies. He'd offered friendship to a lonely old man who'd lost his daughter. He'd slowly, carefully, gotten himself appointed to the board of directors. And then, piece by piece, he'd been buying up shares from smaller investors, consolidating power, preparing for the moment when he could push Richard Rivers out entirely. But Brennan had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated the old man. Richard Rivers might have been heartbroken over his daughter's death, but he wasn't stupid. He'd noticed the power play, he'd seen the danger, and he'd done something very smart. He'd hidden the controlling shares of the company, the ones that had belonged to Jade, in a trust that could only be accessed by her. With her presumed dead and no body ever found, those shares were locked away, untouchable. Brennan could maneuver all he wanted, but without those shares, he could never fully control Rivers Technology. He could never truly win. And now Jade was alive, which meant those shares were hers again, which meant she held all the power. She stood in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom, looking at herself with new eyes. Her hair was longer now, wild and natural in a way Brennan never liked. Her body was thinner from hard work and harder times. Her skin had a toughness to it that came from survival. She didn't look like the privileged daughter of a tech mogul anymore. She looked like someone who'd been to hell and climbed back out. Good. That's exactly who she needed to be. Jade spent the next 2 months preparing. She contacted her father's lawyers using a secret code only the real Jade Rivers would know. She proved her identity with details no one else could have, and she learned that her father was sick, very sick. Cancer, stage 4. The stress of losing his daughter and fighting off Brennan's takeover had broken his body. He had maybe 6 months left, which meant Jade had 6 months to save her father's company and destroy the man who'd stolen everything from her. The lawyers set up a secret meeting. Jade walked into her childhood home for the first time in 4 years on a cold November evening. Her father sat in his study, the same study where he'd taught her about business and ethics and the importance of treating people with dignity. He looked so much older, so much smaller. But when he saw her, when he realized it was really her, his face transformed with such pure joy that Jade nearly broke down. "Jade," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "My girl, my beautiful girl." They held each other and cried for all the lost time, for all the pain, for all the lies. And then they got to work. Richard Rivers might have been dying, but his mind was still sharp as ever. Together, father and daughter crafted a plan. Jade couldn't just show up and reclaim her shares. Brennan would fight it in court, tie everything up for years, maybe even try to have her killed for real this time. No, they needed to be smarter. They needed to let Brennan think he was winning right up until the moment they destroyed him. Over the next 4 months, Jade transformed herself. She enrolled in business courses using her real name, making no secret of her return. Let Brennan hear about it, let him panic. But she didn't approach him, didn't make any claims to Rivers' technology. She just existed, publicly, obviously alive, while Brennan must have been losing his mind trying to figure out her angle. Meanwhile, Jade was learning everything. She studied every deal her father's company had made in the last 4 years. She analyzed Brennan's strategy, found his weaknesses, identified the places where he'd cut corners or made shady deals. She built relationships with board members who'd been loyal to her father, reminded them who she was, and showed them she had her father's brilliant mind and something extra: hunger. She also learned something interesting about Brennan's new wife. Vienna Stone had expensive tastes, very expensive tastes. Brennan's fortune was massive, but even massive fortunes can be drained by a woman who needs a new designer dress for every event and a new sports car every month. The financial pressure was showing. Brennan was leveraged heavily, borrowing money to maintain the lifestyle Vienna demanded while trying to complete his takeover of Rivers' technology. He was vulnerable, and Jade was ready to strike. Drop a like if you're loving this story, hit subscribe, and comment your location. The best part is coming, and you don't want to miss it. The trap was set beautifully. Richard Rivers announced his retirement from Rivers Technology, citing health reasons. The board would need to appoint a new CEO. Brennan thought this was his moment. He'd positioned himself perfectly. The board respected him. The shareholders knew his name. He was the obvious choice. But then Jade made her move. She showed up to the board meeting, not as a daughter begging for her inheritance, as a candidate for CEO. She walked into that conference room wearing a black power suit that cost more than most people's cars, her natural hair styled in a way that said she knew exactly who she was and didn't apologize for it, and carrying a presentation that would blow everyone's mind. Brennan's face when he saw her walk in was worth everything. Every cold night under that bridge, every cruel word he'd thrown at her, every moment he'd made her feel small. His skin went pale. His hands started shaking. And for just a second, she saw pure fear in his eyes. Good. He should be afraid. "Gentlemen," Jade said, her voice calm and powerful, "I'm Jade Rivers. Some of you remember me. Some of you think I'm a ghost. But I'm very real, and I'm here to save this company from a man who's been trying to steal it." For the next 2 hours, Jade laid out Brennan's entire scheme. She had documentation for everything: the suspicious timing of her accident, the shell companies he'd used to buy shares, the backroom deals that violated company policy, the way he'd manipulated her father during his grief, the financial irregularities in accounts he controlled. But the killer blow was something else entirely. Jade had discovered that Brennan had been embezzling money from Rivers Technology to fund his lifestyle with Vienna. Not huge amounts. Nothing that would trigger immediate alarms, but steady streams of cash redirected through complicated transfers that he thought no one would ever track. Corporate theft. That wasn't just a lawsuit. That was prison time. Brennan tried to defend himself. He claimed Jade was lying, that she was mentally unstable, that her memory loss meant she couldn't be trusted. But Jade had come prepared for that too. She had medical records. She had witness statements. She had her father's testimony. She had everything. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Jade Rivers was appointed CEO of Rivers Technology, effective immediately. Brennan Cole was removed from the board, stripped of all positions, and banned from any future involvement with the company. And the lawyers were already preparing criminal charges. As security escorted Brennan out of the building, he finally looked at Jade directly. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone you're crazy, that you're lying, that you're done talking," Jade said quietly. "Security, get him out of my building." She watched him being dragged away, this man who'd tried to erase her, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. He'd thrown away what he thought was a nobody. He didn't realize he was throwing away the only person who could have shown him mercy. But the story wasn't over yet. There was still Vienna. Jade could have ignored her, could have let her run back to whatever modeling agency would still take her. But that felt too easy. Vienna had sat in that car, knowing Nadia was being thrown out in the rain, and hadn't said a word. She'd smiled about it. She'd celebrated it. So Jade made a few phone calls to people in the fashion industry, mentioned Vienna's role in Brennan's schemes, mentioned how she'd knowingly helped destroy a marriage, mentioned how she'd spent money stolen from a tech company on her wardrobe. The industry talks, word spreads fast, and just like that, Vienna Stone found herself blacklisted from every major fashion house, every modeling agency, every brand that cared about its image. Within 3 weeks of Brennan's fall, Vienna filed for divorce. She'd already found a new rich boyfriend, some oil heir who didn't know yet what kind of person she really was. But that was his problem now. Brennan, meanwhile, was facing criminal charges. His lawyers were trying to make deals, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was looking at 5 to 10 years in prison, plus massive fines. His fortune would be gone paying legal fees and restitution. His reputation was destroyed. News outlets were calling him the biggest corporate snake of the decade. And through it all, Jade built her father's company into something even stronger. She was brilliant at the job. She'd inherited her father's genius for strategy and added her own creative vision. Under her leadership, Rivers Technology expanded into new markets, developed cutting-edge products, and became one of the most respected companies in the industry. She treated her employees with dignity. She made ethical decisions even when they weren't the most profitable. She proved that success and decency could go hand in hand. Her father lived long enough to see her first major triumph. A new product launch that made Rivers Technology billions and cemented Jade's reputation as a visionary leader. He died peacefully 6 months after she became CEO, holding her hand, telling her how proud he was. Jade mourned him deeply, but she also knew he'd died happy. He'd gotten his daughter back. He'd seen his life's work in safe hands. He'd watched the man who tried to destroy his family face justice. That was more than most people got. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like and comment where you're watching from. I've got more powerful stories coming. 2 years passed, Jade became famous in the business world, not just for her success, but for her story. The woman who lost everything, including her own memory, and still fought her way back to the top. Magazines wanted interviews. Business schools wanted her to give speeches. Young women, especially young black women, saw her as proof that you could be knocked down and still rise. But Jade never forgot where she'd been. She remembered the diner on 5th Street. She remembered the bridge where she'd slept that first night. She remembered how it felt to be invisible, to be treated like trash, to have nothing but determination keeping you alive. So she started a foundation. It helped women who'd been left behind, abandoned, or abused. It provided job training, housing assistance, and legal help. It gave women what Jade had to find on her own, a second chance. One day, about 3 years after Brennan's downfall, Jade got a message. He wanted to see her. He was in prison serving his sentence, and he'd requested she be added to his visitor list. Her assistant asked if she wanted to approve it. Jade thought about it for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore him completely, let him sit in that cell knowing she didn't even think about him anymore. But another part of her, the part that had grown wise from suffering, knew that she needed closure. She needed to look him in the eye one last time and make sure he understood exactly what he'd lost. So she went. The prison was cold and gray and depressing. Everything about it screamed of punishment and regret. Brennan sat across from her, behind thick glass, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his thinner frame. Prison hadn't been kind to him. His face was haggard, his eyes were tired. He'd aged 10 years in 3. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Brennan spoke. "I'm sorry." Jade raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" "I am." He looked down at his hands. "I was greedy. I was stupid. I threw away something precious because I thought I could have more. And I lost everything." "You didn't lose everything," Jade said. "You threw it away. There's a difference." "I know." He looked up at her, and she saw something real in his eyes for the first time. Regret. "Vienna left me, you know, the second the money was gone. She didn't even wait for the trial to end." "I know," Jade said. "I'm not surprised. But you..." He shook his head. "You loved me even when you had nothing. Even when you didn't know who you were. You loved me when I gave you scraps. And I threw you out like garbage." He pressed his palm against the glass. "I think about that every single day. How I had something real and traded it for something fake." Jade looked at his hand against the glass but didn't mirror the gesture. "You want to know something?" she said quietly. "I did love you. The woman you knew as Nadia loved you with everything she had. But she was naive. She was lost. She was willing to be small so you could feel big." She leaned forward. "I'm not her anymore, Brennan. I'm the woman you tried to erase. And I'm better without you." "I know," he whispered. "I didn't come here for your apology," Jade continued. "I came here to make sure you understand something. You didn't break me. You set me free. Every night you made me feel worthless. You were actually showing me I needed to find worth in myself. Every time you treated me like nothing, you were teaching me that I'm everything. You thought you were crushing me, but you were forging me into something stronger than you could ever be." Brennan's eyes filled with tears. "I see that now." "Good." Jade stood up. "I hope you use your time in here to become a better person. I hope you learn something from this. But whether you do or not doesn't matter to me anymore. You're in my past, and my future is brighter than you could ever imagine." She turned to leave, but Brennan called out one more time. "Jade?" She looked back. "You're going to do amazing things," he said. "I'm sorry I won't be there to see them." Jade nodded once. "So am I, but not for the reasons you think." And then she walked out of that prison and never looked back. Life moved forward. Jade dated occasionally, but she wasn't in a hurry to find love. She was focused on building something bigger than romance. Her company continued to grow. Her foundation helped thousands of women. She bought back her childhood home and filled it with joy and laughter, hosting dinners for her employees, parties for her foundation's success stories, gatherings for people who needed to know they weren't alone. She was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, not because she'd gotten revenge, although that was satisfying, but because she'd found herself, the real self, the strong self, the self that didn't need a man or money or status to know her worth. One evening, 5 years after that rainy night outside Brennan's mansion, Jade stood on the balcony of her penthouse office, looking out at the city lights. Rivers Technology occupied the tallest building downtown now. From here she could see everything. The diner where she'd worked, the bridge where she'd slept, the street where the accident had given her back her memory. And beyond that, the mansion where Brennan used to live, now owned by some tech entrepreneur who didn't know its history. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Rivers, your 6 o'clock is here." "Send them in," Jade said. A young woman walked in, nervous but determined. She was maybe 22, with the kind of fire in her eyes that Jade recognized. She'd been referred by the foundation. She'd been through something terrible, and she needed help. "Ms. Rivers," the woman said, "thank you for seeing me. I know you're busy." "Never too busy for this," Jade said warmly. "Sit down. Tell me your story." As the woman talked, Jade listened with her whole heart. This was her purpose now, not destroying men who'd wronged her, but lifting up women who'd been knocked down. Not revenge. Redemption, not anger. Empowerment. She thought about that inscription in her locket, the one she still wore every day. "The sun sets so stars can shine." Brennan had been her sun once, bright and blinding and impossible to see past. When he set, when he threw her away, she thought her world had ended. But instead, she'd become a star. She'd found her own light, and now she used that light to help others find theirs. That night, after the young woman left with a job offer, a place to stay, and hope for the first time in months, Jade sat at her desk and pulled out a journal. She'd started writing down her thoughts, her lessons, her growth. Maybe one day it would become a book. Maybe one day other women could read about her journey and know that no matter how far you fall, no matter how much you lose, no matter who tries to erase you, you can rise again. She wrote, "They tried to break me because they thought I was weak, but what they didn't understand is that breaking is just the first step to becoming unbreakable. Every crack they made in my foundation, I filled with something stronger. Every piece of me they tried to destroy, I rebuilt with fire. I lost my memory, but I found my power. I lost my name, but I found myself. I lost a man who saw me as disposable, but I gained a legacy that will last forever." She paused, thinking about everything that had led her here. The pain, the struggle, the moment she realized she was more than what anyone said she was, and she wrote one final line. "Thank you, Brennan, for throwing me away, because in the garbage, I found gold. In the darkness, I found my light. In the ending, I found my beginning." You thought you were discarding a broken woman. You were actually freeing a queen. Jade closed the journal, smiled, and looked out at her city. Tomorrow she had a board meeting. Next week she was announcing a major new initiative. Next month she was keynoting a conference for young female entrepreneurs. Her calendar was full of purpose, packed with meaning, overflowing with impact. And somewhere in a prison cell, Brennan Cole lay on a hard bed, staring at a ceiling, thinking about the woman he'd lost and the empire she'd built. Thinking about how different his life could have been if he'd just loved her when he had the chance. Thinking about how the best thing in his life had been right there, and he'd been too blind to see it. But Jade wasn't thinking about him. She'd moved past that. She'd evolved beyond revenge into something more powerful: indifference. He was a chapter in her story, a painful one, an important one, but just one chapter. The rest of the book was hers to write. She thought about that rainy night one last time, how small she'd felt, how lost, how broken. And she thought about how far she'd come, not just financially, not just professionally, but emotionally, spiritually. She'd become the woman she was always meant to be, the woman her father raised her to be, the woman her experiences forced her to be, the woman who'd walked through fire and came out made of diamonds. Before she turned out the lights in her office that night, Jade did something she'd been doing every day for 5 years. She looked at her reflection in the window and said 3 words out loud. "I am enough," and she meant it. With every fiber of her being, with every beat of her heart, with every breath in her lungs, she was enough. She always had been, and no one could ever take that away from her again. The city sparkled below her, full of people with their own stories, their own pain, their own potential. And Jade knew that tomorrow she'd wake up and do it all again. Help someone else find their strength. Build something else that mattered. Prove once more that the woman society might overlook is often the most powerful one in the room. She walked out of her office, rode the elevator down to the lobby, and stepped out into the night air. A young woman passed her on the street, hurrying somewhere, looking stressed and tired and beaten down by life. Their eyes met for just a second. Jade smiled at her, a real smile, a knowing smile, a smile that said, "I see you, I've been you, and you're going to make it." The woman smiled back, just a little, and kept walking. But something in her shoulders straightened. Something in her step got stronger. That's what Jade lived for now. Those small moments, those tiny changes, that quiet revolution of women lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. She got into her car and drove home, not to a mansion built with someone else's money, to a home she'd built with her own hands, her own work, her own worth. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by her. Every painting on the wall reflected her taste. Every room told her story, and it was a good story, a real story, a story of falling and rising and becoming more than she'd ever dreamed possible. The rain started again as she pulled into her garage, but this time, The rain didn't make her sad. It reminded her of how far she'd come, how that rainy night had been the worst moment of her life and the best thing that ever happened to her. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to realize you had everything inside you all along. Before you go, do me one last favor. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video and comment below telling me where you're watching from and what moment hit you the hardest. I read every single comment, and your words mean the world to me. I've got more powerful stories coming your way, stories about strength, survival, and the incredible power we all have inside us. Don't miss them. Subscribe now, and I'll see you in the next one.